Hello everyone, it's old Butterbob Briggs here at my favorite place in the world, Burgess Falls State Park, because I want to talk to you about a tree. And when I say a tree, I don't mean a real tree like this old gentleman behind me. I'm talking about a way to understand the relationships many illnesses have to each other, and why understanding how they're all connected like a tree with a common root that waters them all, and a common root that we can dry up much easier than this complex tree would lead us to believe at first. Understanding this tree will completely change the way you think when you walk into a hospital or a pharmacy or a doctor's office. Never again will you be able to go to a place like that without thinking to yourself that most of the people there are there because they've been on this tree for years and years. This big tree is called metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance syndrome. And if the major illnesses of today were pictured as a tree, then insulin resistance and its partner in crime, chronically high insulin levels, could be pictured as the root of this tree. From this root springs up the trunk of the tree. And the trunk of the tree could represent all the vicious cycles of problems that go on for years and years in your body without you knowing about them. All these processes are caused by or made worse by chronically high insulin levels, either directly or indirectly. These vicious cycles are both caused by this continuously high insulin and in turn feed back and cause high insulin levels to become even higher and last longer. All these go on for years, setting you up to become sick, fat, and hurting. Then, we could look up into this tree and see the many branches growing out of the trunk of unnoticed problems, growing into open, outward branches of disease. All the branches have names that we've all heard about, or even worse, that we've been diagnosed with. All these branches of disease seem like separate, unrelated problems. They affect different people differently. You might be on the type 2 diabetes branch, your husband on the heart disease branch, your daughter on the polycystic ovarian syndrome branch. Your mother may have fatty liver, and she's on a branch too. It's even possible with some of the newer science of the last few years that your sister who has breast cancer and your grandma who has Alzheimer's might be on one of these branches too. Then you might be on this tree but not on one of the branches. You might be outwardly healthy right now, but you found out from your doctor that you had high triglycerides. Guess what? You're on this tree too, but you're still down in the trunk. You're in the trunk of this tree. Your problem hasn't sprung out and grown into an outward branch yet. You might be in the trunk of this tree if you have low HDL cholesterol too. The same can be said if you have high blood pressure. At least 50% of you who have high blood pressure also have high insulin at the root of your tree. Maybe you found out that your blood sugar is slightly high or even fairly high. You're in the trunk of this tree too. Maybe you've been getting fatter around the middle every year. Well, chances are you're in the trunk of this tree too, because belly fat is the best sign that you have chronically high insulin levels at the root of your tree. Other signs that you might be in the trunk of this tree are maybe your doctors put you on blood thinners, because a thickening blood is a sign that you have a chronically high insulin level at the root of your tree. Even though you're fairly healthy outwardly, it's very probable that you're still on this tree. Your problem has just not branched out into open disease yet. High insulin levels exist in our body for years and years, causing and being caused by many other problems like the resistance of certain tissues to the effects of this high insulin level. And resistant tissues both being caused by high insulin levels and in turn feeding back and causing more high insulin to be made. Increasing obesity, getting fat, being caused by high insulin levels making fat storage easier, and also by increasing fat tissue itself becoming eventually resistant to insulin and therefore causing more insulin to be made. Being fat around the middle is the #1 clue that you have chronically high insulin levels. As you get fatter, your fat cells themselves become insulin resistant and cause your body to have to make more insulin. The fatter you become, the more resistance. The more resistance, higher the insulin levels, which continue to feed back, making it easier to store more fat. Folks, this is a true vicious cycle. You know, high insulin causes your body to store more of what you eat as fat, and the increasing fat itself feeds back, becomes resistant to insulin, and causes your insulin levels to go up, which causes you to store more fat. You see, it's a very vicious cycle. Like all these problems are very vicious cycles. The indirect effect of all this insulin is a large amount of inflammatory chemicals this increasing fat tissue produces, increasing widespread inflammation in your body. You know, your fat cells themselves produce inflammatory chemicals, and they cause inflammation to increase throughout your entire body, from your joints to your circulatory system, all through your body. And we could carry this same cause and effect cycle into the liver. It is the liver that's your insulin resistance problem. Your chronically high insulin level problem becomes deadly. Your body can only store so much carbohydrates, so the liver converts the extra carbs into fat. That tends to stay in the liver, and also exports some of those carbs turned into fat into the blood as triglycerides. As your liver becomes fatter, it also becomes more resistant to insulin. This causes your insulin levels to rise, and worse than that, stay higher all the time. All these processes, all these vicious spinning cycles, travel together and cluster together in people who are fat, or who have heart disease, or who have type 2 diabetes, or high triglycerides, or fatty liver, or high blood sugars, or even polycystic ovarian syndrome. The question of which of these is the real root of this tree could be better understood if we thought about the old philosophy question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? If all these processes are like the old which came first, the chicken or the egg debate, then they are really a circle or a feedback loop or a chain of cause and effect, a cycle of spinning events. All these processes become an endless which came first, the chicken or the egg debate, with no right answer, because the chicken lays the egg and the egg hatches the chicken. You know, insulin resistance causes insulin levels to go up, and insulin levels going up causes insulin resistance to become worse, a true feedback loop. If there is any part of these cycles we could step in and stop, if there was any weak link in the chain, then the spinning cycle of cause and effect will stop. So when we look at the root of our tree, we could pick out a chicken, or we could pick out an egg that fuel these vicious cause and effect cycles, and we could fry that chicken, or we could scramble that egg, and the whole cycle of cause and effect will begin to be broken. Now that we've looked at the branches of this tree, let's go down into the roots and look at what causes insulin to become chronically high and what you can do about it. Insulin is released when you eat, period. It doesn't matter what you eat. When you eat, insulin is released. This is completely normal. As we all know, some foods and drinks spike insulin more than others, some much more than others, but eating causes insulin to be released, period. Also, some of us, just by being born to the parents we have and inheriting certain genes, are just more prone to becoming insulin resistant, which, as we've said, insulin resistance and chronically high insulin are traveling partners in crime. Another cause of insulin being high is our lifestyle. Do we snack a lot? Do we constantly drink sugary drinks? And are we active or couch potatoes? All these things get the insulin resistance and chronically high insulin levels started. But this isn't the problem. If having a high insulin level after a meal or two was the problem, we'd all be in trouble fast. But insulin levels after a single meal is not the problem. The root of our tree is chronically, constantly, consistently high insulin levels. The insulin problem builds on itself in a vicious cycle. So continuously snacking and overeating and sucking on a sugary drink all day for years causes insulin levels to remain higher than they would have and last longer than they would have. The more insulin and the longer it remains, the more resistance to insulin, which leads to higher and higher levels of insulin. The fatter you become, the higher the insulin resistance in your tissues, and the higher your resistance, the higher your chronically high insulin levels go. This vicious cycle builds over the years, and at some point, your insulin levels become so high and last so long and remain constantly and chronically high that you no longer need to eat much of anything to maintain a high insulin level. Even while you sleep, your fatty, insulin-resistant liver is making sugar because it no longer feels the effects of this high insulin level. The trunk of this tree springs out into open branches of disease. You become fat, sick, and hurting, out on a limb, and not understanding the problem is in the root of chronically high insulin levels. That's why many of you can't lose weight. Your insulin levels remain high all the time, even when you do a low-carb diet. You eat the so-called good foods all through the day, thinking you're doing the right thing, thinking these low-carb foods are the cure. But any eating causes an insulin response. And because your insulin is chronically high to begin with, it goes even higher, even when you eat the right things. If the problem is chronically high insulin levels, if this is the root of this tree of metabolic diseases, then the way to dry up this root and destroy the tree is to find a way to have chronically low insulin levels. Low carbohydrate is not the cure. Low carb is a treatment strategy to keep your insulin from spiking when you eat. High fat is not the cure either. It is a treatment strategy, and it keeps your appetite under control so you can practice the real cure. The cure is chronically low insulin levels, the exact opposite of this tree. Listen, I got good news for you. Getting your insulin levels chronically lower is easier than you might think. But for most of you who are really fat, really sick, and really hurting, it will take time to dry up the roots of this tree. I'm going to propose a simple plan you can easily carry out on your own to chronically lower your insulin levels, to dry up the underlying root cause of this tree. Listen, what I'm about to say is the most important thing that I'm going to say in this video. So this is really important, folks. The one thing proven to reduce insulin levels the most is fasting. Going without food by mouth for a period of time. In my Butter Makes Your Pants Fall Off video, I talked about a low-carb, high-fat diet. And I talked about how that type of diet keeps your insulin lower and turns down your appetite so you can go hours and hours without eating. Hours without being hungry and without using your willpower at all. The appetite control that a low-carb, high-fat diet gives you makes it easy to fast because you're just not hungry. Low-carb, high-fat imitates fasting itself because both the low-carb, high-fat diet and going without food or fasting, both of these cause the body to burn fat as an energy source. Low-carb, high-fat is using fat from food for energy. Fasting is your body using body fat for food. The problem that people have on this diet is this: they think the fatty foods are the cure. In other words, they believe it is eating butter and other fats that are the magic cure. Of course, eating fatty foods will prevent you from spiking your insulin. So that's good. But more importantly, fatty foods will keep you satisfied longer and allow your body to remain in fat burning mode, which will keep your appetite under complete control, allowing you to eat less often. This eating less often is the real cure to your chronically high insulin problem. And this eating less often is called intermittent fasting, short-term fasting. Not eating less food, but eating your food less often, allowing most of the time each day without eating. This low-carb, high-fat diet is a long-term treatment that we can use to control our appetite while practicing the cure of fasting. Fasting is the cure for chronically high insulin levels. And when we eat, we should eat in a narrow window of time. We need to eat low-carb, high-fat to continue the benefits of fasting. Low-carb, high-fat is an imitation of fasting and allows the processes that are natural to fasting, the low insulin levels, and the burning of fat for energy to continue even when we do eat food. Folks, this is very important. When we eat low-carb, high-fat, we're not turning off the good we're doing while we're fasting by turning off the low insulin levels or the burning of fat. So that's important. And we have a big problem. It's bigger than just being fat. If we're on this tree, either in the trunk without diagnosed disease or in the branches with full-blown open disease, you have at the root of your problem a long-term, chronically high insulin problem. Any eating causes insulin to be released, watering the root of this tree. So periods of not eating are like a drought, daily drying up the root of this tree. Low carb, high fat allows you to eat while continuing the drought. The drying up of the root that fasting causes. What I'm going to tell you is a simple plan, and I think of it as a treatment, a technique to dry up the root. First, keep your diet simple. And when I say simple, folks, I mean just that. Keep your diet simple. 90% of the time, eat very simple. You don't need a recipe for eggs and bacon. You don't need a menu for a piece or two of fried chicken and some green vegetables. Simple means real whole foods. Don't use replacement drinks and meal bars. Stay away from replacement flours like almond and coconut flours. Not because these flours are bad, but because you'll overeat using them. And remember, we're trying to reduce the amount of time we eat each day. Be careful about artificial sweeteners and use them sparingly. And it's best not to use powdered artificial sweeteners at all, like Splenda. Don't use protein shakes, and take it easy on cheese because it's easy to overeat. And because the whey proteins, the WHEY proteins, in cheese and protein shakes, while not raising blood sugars like carbs do, they do tend to seriously raise insulin levels. And remember, the insulin level is at the root of our tree. Our goal is to dry up the root of our tree. It sounds very restrictive, but remember, our goal is to correct our problem. Dry up the roots and get well. The next step on our simple plan is to fast. Fasting is not eating when not hungry. The simple rule is don't eat when not hungry. Don't schedule a snack. Don't eat when not hungry. Don't eat lunch just because it's lunchtime. Don't eat when not hungry. Don't eat breakfast just because it's breakfast time. Don't eat when not hungry. When you do get hungry, eat until you're satisfied. We're not trying to eat less when hungry. We're trying to eat less often. Not eat less, but less often. In other words, we're going to eat most of our meals in a shorter or smaller window of time. and that will leave the rest of the time with us not eating. You can do this any way that's comfortable to you. Listen, you can experiment with this, folks. This not eating when not hungry is a form of intermittent fasting. You see, there is as many ways to do fasting as there are people doing it. You can fit it to your schedule. You could skip breakfast because you're not hungry. That would leave you not eating from, say, 6 p.m. at night when you eat dinner until, let's say, 10 or 11 o'clock the next day when you break your fast and eat lunch, or what will become your breakfast. Now, that's an easy plan. That leaves you not eating about 16 hours each day. My own schedule was different. I ate breakfast about 7 a.m. and fasted most of the day while I slept and ate a late dinner about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. But I work nights, so this just worked for me. And it still left me not eating 15, 16 hours each day, depending on when my meals actually occurred. You can experiment with alternative day fasting. For instance, you could eat a day and fast a day. You could even set this up by eating your last meal at, say, 6 o'clock at night on your eating day, then fasting 24 hours until 5, 6 o'clock the next day on your fasting day. So even on your fasting day, you get to eat dinner. But you've got a 24-hour time without eating, chronically lowering your insulin levels and drying up the root of your tree. Never force this, never deliberately not eat. We're not trying to starve ourselves. When you eat, eat until satisfied. The problem is not the meal. The problem is chronically high or constantly high insulin. Never allowing the body a rest from chronically high insulin levels is the root of our tree. Now listen, while you're fasting, you should drink water for sure. And you can have some clear broth, and you can drink a fatty coffee or a fatty tea, whatever your preference is. While you're fasting, that's not going to hurt your fast. So that's something that you can do on your fasting times. Keep it simple and don't eat when not hungry. This will begin the process of drying up the root of chronically high insulin levels. As insulin levels are kept chronically lower most of the time, the processes going on in the trunk of our tree start to reverse. The body takes the fat out of the liver first. Without this fat, the liver becomes less resistant to insulin. The liver greatly reduces the amount of triglycerides in your blood. It's one of the most noticeable things we see on this diet. As the triglycerides come down, often we find that the good HDL cholesterol begins to go up. As the liver fat comes down, blood sugars begin to normalize. As the belly fat starts to reduce, the inflammation in the body, coming from the fat cells themselves, begins to be reduced. Your arteries stop being damaged. The joints start to heal. Blood becomes thinner. Your body starts being able to break up clots again. And folks, I know these things for a fact. The last time I had blood drawn, the nurse remarked on how quickly my blood filled the vial. And my arthritis pain that was seriously bad is all gone now. And I've seen this from people, I've heard from people all over the world telling me that this is true. This is a side effect of this diet. Look, this is a simple plan to accomplish a very complex goal. This is why I told you at the beginning of this video that when you understood this whole tree of diseases was tied together at the root by chronically high insulin, it would change the way you live your life. And you would never be able to walk into a doctor's office or a hospital or a pharmacy and not think that most of the people you see there are on this tree and they've gotten sick because of years and years of watering the root of chronically high insulin. So now you know, butter makes your pants fall off and lard makes you lean. but using your appetite control and not eating when not hungry. In other words, listening to your own personal diet guru. And fasting will begin the process of drying up the root of this tree. Thanks for watching. And for a much more detailed article on this subject, with links to all the scientific articles I used to write this video, go to my website at www.buttermakesyourpantsfalloff.com. And by the way, come visit me on my Facebook page. We're a friendly bunch of folks getting together just trying to help each other. And you can get there by going to facebook.com/Butter Makes Your Pants Fall Off. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.